is titled Navigating the Phase 4 Mitigation Measures. My name is Isaac Reichman. I'm the Director of Public Information here at the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. A big portion of today's webinar will be used for questions. Please submit any questions that you have into the chat here on WebEx. Again, please use the chat. There's both a chat and a Q&A, and it is much easier for me to track and respond to questions if they come in through the chat. I just typed into there. Please use the chat again for questions. If I don't get to every question, or more likely I don't know the answer to certain questions, you'll see an email address on the bottom of every single page. That's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Please, and I'm typing that into the, excuse me, I'm typing that into the chat as well. Please use bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org for any additional questions or questions that aren't answered, or really anything related to business regulation here in the city of Chicago, whether it's COVID related or not. We can help track down those answers via that BACP outreach email. Again, I'll do my best to answer every question I can for folks that have been on these webinars before. I'm here representing Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. That's BACP. We're the ones who kind of enforce and regulate all the COVID-19 regulations and other business regulations here in Chicago. I won't be able to speak too much today on a little bit of the health metrics and the reason why behind some of these regulations. If you do send us an email, though, I'm happy to work with our health department to track down some answers if I can't answer those questions here on today's webinar. Additionally, the webinar is being recorded. As always, we will post this webinar to our YouTube page and also to our business education page, which is where you navigated to get to this webinar. That's chicago.gov/business education, typing that into the chat as well. Finally, before we go on, I want to point everybody to chicago.gov/reopening. We know these regulations are changing regularly, so the best source for the latest City of Chicago regulations for COVID is that website I just typed in, chicago.gov/reopening. Great. Before we get into the specifics of the regulations today, I did want to take a little bit of time to talk about where we are at as a city in our ongoing fight against COVID-19. What you see in front of you right here is a screenshot that I just took this morning from the city's COVID dashboard. That's at chai.gov/COVID-. You see it on the top there. Again, I'm also going to type it into the chat. Sorry. Now you can see it on the correct page. That's chai.gov/COVID-. I'm going to type that into the chat as well so everyone has that. Again, chai.gov/COVID-. I'm going to put this here first by saying to show, we are doing remarkably well in recent weeks and months in the fight against COVID. You can see on the top right, positivity rate. We spiked around the middle to end of November, a little bit before Thanksgiving. Our positivity rate got above 15%. As of today, we're at 5.6%. That is great news. We're down just last week, we were at 6.9%. Hospitalizations are going down consistently as well. We have consistently enough beds in our ICU beds in our hospitals. Really across the board, deaths are going down. Cases are going down. Everything is going down across the board, which is a really, really good sign. And I do want to thank all of you for your ongoing efforts in making that happen. And that is why we were just this past Sunday able to fully remove ourselves from the state-imposed mitigation measures and enter back into phase 4. Phase 4 in Chicago, as all of you know by now, I'm sure, does look a little different and does keep some stricter regulations in place than you see across the state. And I'm going to get into a little bit of the reasoning why in just 1 minute. Again, I'm not the health department, so any more detailed questions on that, I'm happy to work to get you answers. But I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview first of what phase 4 looks like, and then why these measures remain in place, at least for the time being. First, under phase 4, indoor dining, and events remain limited to 25% capacity or 25 people. So for now, even though we're out of the tier 1 mitigations, the capacity for indoor dining and indoor events remain limited to that 25% capacity or 25 people. Bar seating can resume, however, so that is something that was not allowed under the previous mitigation measures. Now you can have people sit at the bar, and you can now have tables of up to 6 people. Most other industries that isn't indoor dining or events remain limited to the lesser of 40% or 50 people capacity. The across the board non-essential business curfew is repealed. That up until this past Sunday, we had a non-essential business curfew, which said all non-essential businesses must close at 11 p.m. That has been repealed. However, bars and restaurants must still close now by midnight, and they must end alcohol service by 11. So you can't, no more alcohol service after 11, must have people off site by midnight. Again, and I'm going to go into all of these regulations in way more detail. So this is just a quick overview before going into additional details. Chicago.gov/reopening, again, is your source for all of this most updated information. So I know there's a lot of questions about this. I want to hedge and preface by, again, I'm not the health department. We rely on our experts in the health department to make these decisions. These aren't decisions made by BACP. But why do indoor dining capacity limits, both for events and indoor dining, why are they remaining in place? For our health department, there's a couple reasons. First, and probably most importantly, is this 2-week incubation period. From our health department, their recommendation is whenever any major change happens, to keep that change in place for at least 2 weeks before considering any additional change. From our health experts, that's best practices when it comes to things like this. And as you all know, indoor dining just started about a week and a half ago on January 23rd. Again, very limited. So while we are excited to have indoor dining back under these limited this limited capacity, health department wants to keep those capacity limits in place for at least 2 weeks before evaluating and making a determination to move forward. So that 2 weeks is up on Saturday, this Saturday. So we will, the health department is going to be looking at the numbers at that point and making some sort of determination about when we can be moving forward. Additionally, while metrics have been getting way better in recent weeks and months, our positivity rate and our total cases per day are still higher than before the second surge. As you know, in October, our second surge started. Our positivity rate, 5.6%, is great. We're down below 600 new cases a day. That's great. But back before the second surge, our positivity rate was even lower, and our cases per day were significantly lower. So while we've made a lot of progress, we've yet to get really fully down from that spike. I looked up the last time that we moved forward in increasing indoor capacity was in the end of September, on September 28th. At that point, our positivity rate was 4.3%. So while it's been really good, we're still not quite at that number that we were more or less under 5% or right around 5% for the entire summer. So we're excited about the progress. We want to make sure that we keep making progress, though. And really that 5% number is something that the health department has looked at as one of our real thresholds. So once we get down below and closer to 5%, is when we may start looking to increase more indoor capacity. Also, while we've made great progress, and I unfortunately wish I could speak a little more to these new variants, this isn't obviously my expertise, there are a number of new variants of COVID. While we're pushing out the vaccine, we also know that there is potential with new variants coming in that we may see an additional surge in the future. So all that is to say, we want to make very sure that we're not rushing to reopen too quickly, which may potentially jeopardize our hard-earned progress. So at this point, those indoor dining capacity limitations do remain in place. We look to be sharing additional information from the health department in the very near future about when we can and what metrics we would need to hit in order to expand capacity beyond what we have right now. So at this point, again, they do remain in place. We hope to share additional information really soon and continue to monitor the progress. 5.6% is wonderful. I feel like I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it wasn't all that long ago. We were just a couple weeks ago, we were around 10%. So we've made great progress, and we hope, again, to expand capacity soon. So I'm going to provide a quick overview of all of the different industries, and then I'm going to go into some detail, and I see a couple questions come in. I'm going to go into detail specifically at mostly for bars and restaurants and for other establishments like that. So first, bars and restaurants. Indoor service is still limited to 25% capacity, no more than 25 people. Outdoor service can continue under existing regulations. No tables exceeding 6 people. Again, bar seating can resume. Alcohol service ends at 11, and you must close for on-site service at midnight. Events are also limited at this time still to 25% capacity and no more than 25 people per space. So really, events at this point are following the exact same capacity restrictions and regulations that we have in place for bars and restaurants. Commercial and residential buildings and hotels are limited to 40% and no more than 50 per space. However, events, no matter where those events are taking place, limited to no more than 25% or 25 people. Indoor recreation, places like bowling and arcades, limited to 40% capacity and no more than 50 people. Groups limited to no more than 10 at this point. Museums, limited to 25% capacity. Personal services, limited to 40% capacity. And services that require the removal of face coverings are allowed with safety precautions. So this has been the case for a couple tiers now, so nothing new. Services such as beard shaves, facials, things like that are allowed. Non-essential retail limited to 40% capacity. Grocery stores and pharmacies are still at 50%. Performance venues and movie theaters limited to 40%, no more than 50 people per space. Health and fitness centers also at 40% capacity. Indoor group classes are limited at that same 40% capacity with no more than 15 people per space. Childcare listed limited to 17 per group. Out of school programs still limited to 15 per group. I'm going to if anyone has a couple questions on some other industries, I am again going to talk about restaurants and bars at this point. So can I define a space for commercial spaces? So when I say, see a couple questions come in. When I define space for commercial spaces, the question is, can you define space for commercial spaces? For example, is the capacity per floor if you occupy several floors of a commercial building per room. So when we say 40% capacity for commercial spaces, we really mean across the entire area that the commercial space takes up. So you should be at no more than 40% capacity. All additional rooms and spaces should also be at 40% capacity within there as well. We still encourage remote work as much as possible, but there isn't a formal guidelines at this point. Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about bars and restaurants here in phase 4. Again, I've said it a few times. Indoor service is permitted at the lesser of 25 people or 25% capacity with no more than 6 people per indoor table. Still under phase 4, food must be available at all times. That means if you are a bar, a tavern, or a brewery, you must have food available for your patrons. That can be as simple as saying, we're partnering with the pizza place next door so that they'll drop off food, you can go get food and bring it in. Or it can really be as simple as saying, A third-party delivery app can deliver here. Here is the address you give them. You can have your food delivered here. The important thing is that food is available at all times. And secondly, that patrons know that food is available at all times. It's not enough for you as the bar owner to just say, oh, yeah, food is available, but we've never made that fully available. We've never made that known to our customers. Bar seating can resume, and I saw a couple questions. Related to this. So bar seating can resume. You need to have 6 feet of social distancing between parties. 6 feet of social distancing is always your magic number. So you can have people sit at the bar, but you need to have 6 feet between one party and the other party. As is always the case, if you don't want to do 6 feet or you cannot do 6 feet, you can put up some sort of impermeable barrier, but you need either 6 feet or an impermeable barrier up between. And it's the same with tables that are set up indoors. They need to be 6 feet apart. If you can't do 6 feet, or if you don't want to do 6 feet, you can do impermeable barriers in between. Fully enclosed tents are allowed, but they are considered indoors. So again, you can do fully enclosed tents, but they are considered indoors, which means they must follow this 25 people or 25% capacity rule. Want to remind everybody that outdoor service is still permitted. So what we have been calling outdoors, considering outdoors, and the rules that we have been following for outdoors remain in place in phase 4. That means anything that is outdoors can still continue to operate. That means sidewalk cafes, rooftops, and retractable roofs. Outdoor tents are considered outdoors only if they have at least 50% of their walls open. Otherwise, they're considered indoors. Igloos and one-party structures are considered outdoors. They need some sort of ventilation. They need some sort of open panel, so there's some sort of ventilation, and they must just be for one party. You cannot have multiple parties within an igloo, otherwise that's considered indoors. Finally, indoor spaces can where 50% of the wall can be removed by the opening of a window, door, or panel, provided that dining tables are within 8 feet of such opening. So if you have, I know many of you set up these spaces during when indoor service wasn't allowed at all. If you have those tables that are within 8 feet of a wall that's at least 50% open, you can continue operating those. And it does not count towards your indoor capacity. That is separate. And again, 6 feet per outdoor table, 6 people per outdoor table, and 6 feet between tables. I see a lot of questions come in here, and I promise I will answer those when I'm just done with this slide here. Face coverings must be worn at all times except when seated and actively eating or drinking. Again, face coverings at all times except when seated and actively eating or drinking. When patrons go to the restroom or potentially go up to order, or any other time while they're waiting for their food, any other time when they're not actively eating or drinking, face coverings must be worn. Employees must wear face coverings at all times. Tables, again, must be 6 feet apart. Next, patrons must be seated while eating or drinking. This is very important. This is the case for events or at any establishment. Patrons must be seated while eating or drinking. Events can occur, but they must follow all these indoor dining regulations. Reservations are encouraged, but not required. Now that we enter phase 4 regulations, reservations are no longer required. Also, a 2-hour time limit is no longer required. That was something in place when we were under Tier 1. That is no longer required. The sale of alcohol must end at 11 p.m. This is all types of sales of alcohol at bars or restaurants. For on-site service, to go, or delivery, they all must still end at 11. Establishments must close for on-site service at 12. That means patrons can stay after 11, but they must, finishing their drinks, finishing eating, things like that, but they must be off-site at midnight. That doesn't mean you drop off the food at 11:59 and they can stay later. That means they need to be fully off-site at midnight. Pickup or delivery of food can continue for all of an establishment's licensed hours. Before moving on, I am going to take a minute to answer questions specifically on bars or restaurants. I know I've seen a lot come in. Great. I do see a couple questions. Why are events limited to 25 people? I know that is still a pretty strict regulation in place. At this point, again, we're hoping to expand soon, but at this point, events are limited still to no more than 25 people or 25%. For bar seating, do you need partitions or just 6 feet apart? If patrons are 6 feet apart, you do not need partitions. If they are less than 6 feet apart, then you would need partitions. Looking for a more detailed explanation of 25 guests per room or space. So this is a question we've actually been getting really throughout COVID. What exactly is defined as a room that can have different capacity limits? It really, our guidelines are for you can have 25% or 25 people within each room or space. And to get up to 25 within each room, they need to be really entirely separate spaces without intermingling of patrons. So it's not enough to just say, hey, this corner of my ballroom, we're calling one space, this other corner, another space. They really need to be truly different spaces. We're happy to, again, truly different spaces with dividers and without intermingling. If you have a specific question, please send that via email. We're happy to kind of look at plans and give some guidance there. All right. Sorry, just scrolling through the questions. Seen a couple questions about recreation facilities and performance venues. I'll get to all those in detail on the next slide. Great. Are houses of worship included with events? Any event is considered, any sort of private event like wedding or potluck, things like that, whether they're at a restaurant, at a banquet hall, out at a house of worship, is considered an event. And however, normal places of worship, your normal services at places of worship are not considered events. Those can operate at 40% with no more than 50 people. Great question. Do they have to eat food or eat food, or do they just have to have food available? That is a great question. Patrons do not need to actually purchase and eat food in order to be on site, whether you're a bar, restaurant, brewery, tavern, does not matter. The requirement is not that they need to order food. The requirement is that food is available. And then following up on that, it does need to be more than just snacks, such as pretzels or peanuts. You need to have some sort of full, something more than that, something that would really either be something that would require a retail food establishment license is kind of what we're looking at, which means food needs to be available from a licensed retail food establishment. If you are licensed as a retail food establishment, then you just need to make your food available. Otherwise, you need to make food available from a licensed retail food establishment. Again, this can be really, truly as simple as, hey, you can order from Grubhub, maybe posting a little sign that says, order from Grubhub, here's our address. That's it. It does not need to be a really heavy lift at all. It should not be a heavy lift at all. I had a question, how is maximum capacity determined? Is there a formula we can look up? Great question. Can you send us that via email? Most establishments will have an occupancy placard. If you have an occupancy placard, it's as simple as taking 25% of your occupancy. If you don't have an occupancy placard, we can provide some guidance on that. Unfortunately, I don't have the number right in front of me right now, but send us an email and I'm happy to follow up there. Are there capacity limits for common spaces within commercial buildings? Yes, all common spaces within commercial buildings limited to 40% capacity or no more than 50 people. I had a question about pet grooming and pet training businesses. They most closely, yeah. So really, if you're, I apologize for changing slides. Really, if you're not at this point, if you're not really 100% sure what industry you fall in, if you don't fall into bars and restaurants, most other establishments are at 40% capacity. So something like pet grooming, pet training business can operate at 40% capacity. Got a question about visiting people at senior housings and hospitals. If you send that, that does not fall under our regulation here at BACP. We're happy to find you an answer there, though, if you send us an email to BACP Outreach. Okay. Great. So for offices, 40% capacity. I had a question, what exactly is the capacity for offices? 40% capacity or 50 people. So within your office, you can have more than 50 people, provided that they're all not within one gathering area. So really, it's like those common areas, meeting rooms, things like that can't have more than 50 people, but it's 40% capacity across your entire office space. Question, do the tables need to be 6 feet apart or the people sitting at the table? It is the tables that need to be 6 feet apart. Thank you for that question. Mentioned 25% of room capacity, but it can't be any more than 25 people. That is correct. It is the lesser of 25% capacity or 25 people. And again, patrons must be seated while eating or drinking. So the follow-up question, can folks be standing at a bar where groups are 6 or less, or do they need to be seated? Patrons need to be seated if they are at a bar, really seated any time that they are eating or drinking. Question now, someone saying that their patrons don't believe that they have to be masked up the whole time. They take it off as soon as they sit down, and they want to keep it off. So again, the requirement for masks is that, for face coverings, is that they are worn at all times except when actively eating or drinking. The important part of that, though, is that they have those face coverings on whenever the server, waiter, waitress comes over to the table. That's really the important part. If patrons are seated, and have a drink in front of them, we don't really expect them to put the face covering on in between each sip. The important thing really is that, while they're waiting for the food, if there's nothing in front of them, they should have them on. And whenever a server comes up, they should be putting them on. Right. And now I see a couple questions come in related to performance venues, indoor recreation, places like that. And I'm actually going to get to that here on the next slide. Because I know performance venues, bowling alleys, movie theaters, places like that also serve food. So I wanted to provide a little bit of clarity here. So first, patrons must be seated at all times when eating or drinking, no matter the industry. So if you're a bowling alley, if you're a performance venue, if you're a movie theater, you can serve food. Patrons must always be seated while eating or drinking. Indoor recreation, performance venues, and movie theaters, again, are allowed to operate at 40% capacity or 50 people. The distinction here is as follows. If the food or drink is being consumed at tables and or served by employees that bring you the food, then you fit under bars and restaurants, and then you need to have 25% capacity and 25 people and no more than 6 people per table. So it doesn't matter if there's a performance going on or if there's some sort of indoor recreation going on. If people are eating at tables or if the food is being served by employees that bring food out to you, then you count as a bar or restaurant and you must operate at 25% or 25 people. If that is not the case, if you're a movie theater, for example, where people order food and bring it to their seat and they're not seated at tables, then they can consume the food at their seats at the 40% capacity or no more than 50 people. So if you want to know if you count as a performance venue or if you count as a restaurant or bar, ultimately what matters is, are people sitting at tables where they're facing each other while they don't have masks on? Or is an employee bringing food over to people while they're seated? If that is the case, then you count as bars or restaurants and you're 25%. If it's just counter service where people bring it to their seat and they're not facing people around a table, then it's at 40% or 50 people. And again, events at this point are limited to 25% capacity or 25 people. So for example, if you're a bar or restaurant and you have a DJ performing or you have a band performing, that is allowed. But if folks are sitting at tables, they must be following the 25% and 25 people regulations. Great. Real quick, I want to review the Health and Fitness Center guidelines. There's really no major change as we enter phase 4 at this point. Indoor activity is still limited to 40% capacity. Indoor group classes with no more than 15 people, while outdoor classes are limited to 50 people. Face coverings must be worn by all customers and employees indoors. The only time they can be removed is during outdoor activity if 6 feet of social distancing is maintained. Again, 6 feet is that magic number, must be maintained between individuals and equipment. Locker rooms can open with strict social distancing and capacity restrictions. Auxiliary accommodations, saunas, steam rooms, hot tubs should remain closed, are required to remain closed. Reservations are no longer required. Before opening it up to additional questions that I see come in, we'll spend the rest of the time at questions. I wanted to provide a couple additional business updates. Obviously, we're here talking about the reopening guidelines, reopening regulations, but I would be remiss if I didn't provide these other updates. First, all business licenses have been extended. We've actually extended it, I believe, 3 separate times. At this point, all licenses that would expire between March 15th of last year and June 15th of this year will be considered active until July 15th of this year. We do not want your license renewal to be a burden towards your operation at this point. So not required to renew licenses during this time. Additionally, many of you have sidewalk cafes. Now would be the time that during most years you're working to renew your sidewalk cafe or apply for a new sidewalk cafe permit for next year. We've extended all current sidewalk cafe permits to remain active until May 1st of this year. So if you have a current sidewalk cafe, typically it would expire at the end of February, and you would have to get a new one starting March 1st. Now they will be extended until May 1st, so you won't need to get a new one until that date. Additionally, the sidewalk cafe reforms that we passed for 2020 will also apply for 2021. That means 75% fee reduction for sidewalk cafes. That means you can extend your sidewalk cafe in front of a neighboring business, provided that that business is not a restaurant. And finally, sidewalk cafe permits will not need to go through City Council this year in order to expedite the issuance process. But again, 2021 season does not start until May 1st. Your current sidewalk cafe can continue to operate until May 1st. Finally, I want to make sure to remind everybody, if you don't already know about the Paycheck Protection Program, strongly recommend that everybody apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, which is obviously, it's not something that BACP itself oversees. It's run by the United States Small Business Administration. But you can apply for loans through the Paycheck Protection Program, even if you got one, even if you've already received a Paycheck Protection Program back during the first round last spring and summer. You can apply for an additional loan, second one through the Paycheck Protection Program. You apply through your traditional lender. You can apply through online banks. You can apply through community-based organizations. Again, we're not BCP does not oversee this, so we're not the 100% experts on all these answers. However, we are having a webinar today at 2 p.m. If anybody has any questions on the Paycheck Protection Program, I strongly recommend that you join our webinar. Again, that's today at 2 p.m. The Small Business Administration will be on, providing an overview of the Paycheck Protection Program. Then we're also going to have 4 banks, 4 traditional lenders that will be on to talk specifically about how to apply and to answer some of your detailed questions. They're going to be there along with the Illinois Bankers Association. We're going to have representatives from BMO Harris, JP Morgan Chase, PNC, and US Bank. So if you have any questions related to the PPP, please join today's webinar at 2 p.m. You can always email us. Again, we're not the experts. I'm not going to know the answers, but happy to get you in contact and to get answers to as many questions as we can there. Great. Now going to open it up for additional questions. Make sure I didn't miss any that came in earlier. As a reminder, please don't hesitate to email us. We're happy to answer any additional questions that we don't get through today. Great. Questions about band members and employees counting towards 25%. It's a great question. Ultimately, our guidance when it comes to 25% and to the capacity is that person in the space the entire time? If you have a band that is set up in the space and sitting there for 2 hours performing, they would count towards the 25%. If you have employees, like most employees at a bar and restaurant that are walking in and out, that go to different areas of the space, those would not count. Employees do not typically count towards the 25%. Same with fitness centers, for example. The person giving the class counts towards that 15 people max because they're in the space the entire time. Great. So what is the situation for hotel fitness and hotel swimming pools? So hotel fitness centers, hotel swimming pools must follow the same regulations as our general health and fitness centers. They can have up to 40% capacity, no more than 50 people within space. Same with the swimming pool itself. So unsupervised fitness centers can be open. At the end of the day, though, it is your, you as the business owner must make sure that the rules are being followed. It's not enough to simply have, if you believe that you can make sure that folks are staying 6 feet apart and wearing face coverings, then they can open up unsupervised. But it's ultimately your responsibility as a business owner to make sure that the regulations are being followed. Had a question about neighborhood festivals. That's not something I'm an expert on, but I'm happy to follow up with the folks that are if you send us an email. Great. Follow up to the recent question. Individuals picking up food are not included in the capacity limit. That is correct. Folks that are walking in, picking up food are not counted towards that capacity limit. Does someone at a treadmill at the gym need to wear a mask if the machines are 6 feet apart? If you are indoors, yes. At all times when indoors, face coverings must be worn, even if the treadmills are 6 feet apart. Had a question here. Can I go over events with 25 capacity or 25 people? So yes, events are limited to 25% capacity and no more than 25 people. Events, though, must follow the indoor dining regulations. Those folks cannot congregate within all sitting at 2 tables, let's say. They still must be in tables that are 6 feet apart. They still must be seated when they're eating and drinking. Had a question about if there was an extension for the renewal of the management sanitation class. If you can send that question via email, I apologize. I'm not an expert on that, but I can get you an answer on that. That's a great question. Okay. Let me scroll through to see if there's anything I missed earlier. Great. Regarding group fitness classes, is space a permanent to 20? No more than 15 people per classes. Does the space need to be a permanent wall with a door, or would an impermeable barrier suffice? An impermeable barrier, something like that, would suffice, provided that it's truly tall enough to kind of prevent some prevent anything from kind of going in between there. Great. Great. Do employees in an office environment need to wear a mask at all times, even if they're 6 feet apart? No. If you are in an office and you are seated more than 6 feet apart, you do not need to keep your face covering on at all times. Folks want to know when exactly to send the email. Send the email. It is to that email on the screen. I'm going to type it into the chat as well in case you want to just copy and paste it. A best way to handle individuals who do not comply. This is something that obviously has been a question throughout COVID. You as the business owner can refuse entry to someone for a variety of reasons, one of them being not wearing a face covering. So you obviously don't want to resort to calling police and unruly customers, but there is, if situations do certainly get out of hand, that is a possibility. We at this point COVID rules have been in place for many, many months. We do truly hope that patrons are complying, but it is you have the ability as a business owner to refuse entry to folks that do refuse to comply. Great. Folks, so I had a great question. If you have a musician playing at a bar in a separate room and the audience is sitting in seats with food available, is that like a movie theater or is it in a restaurant? So if you have a musician that's kind of in a separate room and people are sitting at seats with food available, is that a movie theater or is it a restaurant? Great question, and want to kind of move back to this slide for the important distinction there. If the food is being consumed at tables, meaning that patrons are facing each other and it's seated at tables, then it's considered a restaurant. If you have employees bringing food to customers, it is considered a restaurant. If you have counter service and then patrons sit at seats where they are not facing each other, where they're just facing the performance, then it is considered a performance venue, and you can go under the 40% or 50 people capacity. I see a couple questions come in. I have a couple questions come in related to commercial spaces. If you can send those questions via email, and we're happy to get you answers there. Are condo association fitness centers subject to the maximum capacity limits? Yes. All fitness centers, whether they're in condos, hotels, does not matter. All fitness centers are subject to this rule. Had a question, folks, from previous webinars about instructors being included in group class. My understanding is that instructors are still and have been considered part of group class. I'm happy to follow up there. Please send me an email and I can get that as well. Is there a requirement for folks to go cashless or take credit cards? That's not a formal requirement. Obviously, we recommend folks to minimize interaction as much as possible. There is not a requirement to go cashless, however. Great. I'm going to stay on for a couple more minutes. If folks have questions, again, don't hesitate to send any questions via email. I hope to be sharing with you guys very, very soon specifics for when and how we would expand capacity. The important thing is that we're keeping on, our cases keep going down. I believe the cases are the lowest today that they've been since mid or beginning of October, which is wonderful. So thank you all very much for your continued dedication. Quick point about enforcement. Obviously, we're going to be continuing to enforce here. However, we're kind of shifting strategy a little bit. We have focusing more and more of our enforcement resources on something that BACP does called the Active Compliance Program. That means we're going to have more of our investigators focusing on proactively visiting businesses to walk them through all these regulations in a non-punitive, non-disciplinary way. So we're focusing on bars and restaurants right now. You may get a call from our investigators asking to set up an active compliance program visit. And, it's an opportunity for us to just walk through in a non-disciplinary manner all the new regulations and how exactly to be compliant. So we, thank you again for your ongoing compliance. And I hope to be here very, very soon talking through additional loosening of regulations. But I ask if, to please stay diligent and we can hopefully continue to move forward and continue moving in the right direction. Great. Thank you all again. I'll stay on. I see a couple more questions come in. I'll stay on for specific questions. Are city offices open? BACP is not open at this point to the public. But other city offices are. The Department of Finance and the city clerk's office is open to the public. We'll provide more information as things hopefully change. Thank you all for joining.